The moving truck arrived on a Tuesday, a dull grey Tuesday, where the clouds hung low and the air felt heavy with an unspoken tension. It parked haphazardly in the driveway of the only empty house left on our street, as if it had no intention of staying long or fitting in. Our street, once a perfect picture of suburban tranquility, now held a question mark, the kind of question that lingers, unsettling and unanswered. The moving men came and went, faceless in their company uniforms, unloading box after box after box. Their movements were mechanical, almost too precise, as if rehearsed. No one saw the family, no furniture, no hint of the life that would soon occupy the space. The house remained eerily silent, its windows dark and uninviting. Days passed, the sun setting and rising on an empty porch. The house stood still as if waiting for something or someone to bring it to life. Neighbours whispered, speculating in hushed voices behind cupped hands. Who were these people? Why hadn't they unpacked? Was something wrong? The air buzzed with curiosity and unease. Then, one crisp morning, a figure appeared. Emerging from the mist like a shadow given form, he walked with a deliberate, almost unnerving calm. He was tall and thin, with a shock of black hair that seemed to absorb the light around it. His presence was magnetic, yet unsettling. He wore a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. It was the kind of smile that left you wondering if it was meant to comfort or conceal. Eyes that watched, observed, took note of everything and everyone. They seemed to see more than they should, as if peeling back layers of secrets. He introduced himself as Alistair, his voice a low melodic rumble that carried an air of authority, yet left an echo of mystery. He had a wife, he said, and 2 children. But there was no sign of them, no laughter, no movement, just his solitary figure. They were still settling in, or so he claimed. Yet the house remained as lifeless as the day they arrived, shrouded in an air of quiet foreboding. Alistair's arrival did little to settle the unease that had taken root on our street. His wife, Clara, was a wisp of a woman with eyes that darted nervously around, never meeting another's gaze. The children, a boy and a girl, were rarely seen. When they were, they moved like shadows, silent and swift. There was something off about them, something not quite right. Their smiles seemed painted on, their words measured and rehearsed. It was as if they were playing a part, acting out the roles of a normal family, but failing to convince anyone. The neighbours, once so eager to welcome a new family, now found excuses to stay away. Gardens were tended with unusual haste, curtains were drawn a little tighter. The laughter of children playing, once a familiar soundtrack to our days, was replaced by a strained silence. The first sign that something was truly wrong came with the disappearance of Mrs. Henderson's cat, Mittens. Mittens, a fluffy Persian with a penchant for napping in sunbeams, was a fixture in the neighbourhood. He was always getting underfoot, winding himself around ankles, demanding attention with an insistent meow. One day, Mittens was simply gone. Mrs. Henderson, distraught, knocked on every door, her voice trembling as she asked if anyone had seen her beloved companion. But Mittens was gone, vanished without a trace. Then it was Mr. Johnson's Labrador, Buddy, a boisterous but gentle soul who wouldn't hurt a fly. He disappeared from his own backyard, his leash still attached to the fence, dangling limply in the breeze. The disappearances continued. A rabbit, 2 goldfish, a hamster, each one vanishing without a sound, without a trace. Fear, cold and insidious, began to seep into the heart of our once peaceful community. The fear was compounded by the strange occurrences that began to plague our nights. Whispers, carried on the wind, seemed to emanate from the direction of Alistair's house. They were low, indistinct murmurs like voices speaking in a language no one understood. Some claimed to see lights flickering in the windows of the house long after everyone should have been asleep. Others spoke of shadows moving within, taking on grotesque and unsettling shapes. Sleep became a luxury few could afford. Parents held their children a little tighter, whispering reassurances they themselves didn't believe. Dogs barked at nothing, their fur on end. The air grew thick with suspicion and dread. One particularly oppressive evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long, ominous shadows across our street, a small group of us gathered at the edge of Alistair's property. We hadn't planned it, not exactly, but we were all drawn there, united by our fear and our desperate need for answers. We stood there for a long moment, our breaths misting in the cool night air, listening to the silence that seemed to press down on us like a physical weight. Finally, Mr. Thompson, a burly man with a booming voice that belied his trembling hands, cleared his throat. "We have to do something," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't just sit back and wait for something else to happen." We decided to confront Alistair. It seemed reckless, foolhardy even, to willingly approach the source of our fear. But we were desperate. We had to know what was going on, why our pets were disappearing, why our nights were plagued by whispers and shadows. We found Alistair sitting on his porch, bathed in the pale glow of a single porch light. He was reading a book, his face impassive, as if he hadn't a care in the world. He looked up as we approached, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Good evening, neighbours," he said, his voice as smooth and rich as dark chocolate. "What brings you all here on this fine evening?" His demeanour, so calm and composed, did little to ease our apprehension. We exchanged nervous glances, each of us hoping someone else would speak first. Finally, Mrs. Henderson, her face etched with worry and grief over the loss of her beloved mittens, found her voice. Her trembling hands clutched a photograph of the cat, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. It was as if speaking the words aloud would make the nightmare real. She told Alistair about our fears, about the missing pets, the strange noises, the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her voice cracked as she described the eerie silence that had settled over the neighbourhood, a silence that seemed to grow heavier with each passing night. Alistair listened patiently, his smile never wavering. It was a smile that seemed too perfect, too practiced, as though it had been carefully crafted to mask something far more sinister. When she was finished, he sighed, a long, drawn-out sound that seemed to hang in the air between us. The sound was almost theatrical, as if he were playing a role in a story only he understood. "I understand your concerns," he said, his voice still calm, but with an underlying current of something cold and sharp. His words were measured, deliberate, as though he were choosing them with great care. "But I assure you, you have nothing to fear from me or my family." His tone was soothing, almost hypnotic, but it did little to ease the tension in the room. "We are simply trying to make a new life for ourselves here." His words rang hollow. They felt rehearsed, like lines from a script he had recited countless times before. We had seen his true face, felt the darkness that clung to him like a shroud. It was a darkness that seemed alive, pulsating with a malevolent energy that sent shivers down our spines. We knew in our hearts that he was responsible for the fear that had gripped our community. The unease that had seeped into our lives was no coincidence. It was his doing, his presence. But before we could confront him, before we could demand answers, something happened. A sudden, inexplicable burst of light shattered the darkness, and the air grew thick with an unnatural chill. Chaos erupted, and in that moment we realized we were too late. The air around us crackled, the temperature plummeting as a wave of icy energy washed over us. The porch light flickered and died, plunging us into darkness. There was a collective gasp, the rustle of clothing as we instinctively drew closer together. When the light returned, flickering back to life a moment later, Alistair was gone. We searched for him, of course. We scoured the neighborhood, our hearts pounding with a mixture of fear and adrenaline, but he was gone. Vanished without a trace, just like our pets. The police, when they finally arrived, dismissed our story as a collective hallucination brought on by stress and too much gossip. They chalked it up to the overactive imaginations of a community on edge, desperate for answers to the unexplainable. They found no evidence of foul play, no sign of Alistair or his family. The house stood empty, as if waiting for someone who would never return. It was as if they had never existed. Their belongings, their presence, even their memories seemed to fade, leaving only questions behind. Life slowly returned to a semblance of normality. The whispers ceased, the shadows stopped moving, but the air felt heavier, as though the street itself carried the weight of what had happened. Children played in the street again, their laughter tentative at first, then growing louder, more carefree with each passing day. But the fear lingered. It was in their eyes, in the way they glanced over their shoulders, as if expecting something to emerge from the shadows. It lingered in the way we looked at each other, in the way we locked our doors at night, in the way we avoided talking about that summer, the summer the demon came to our street. It was a silence born of fear, a collective agreement to pretend it never happened. Because deep down, we all knew the truth. We knew that some things, once invited in, never truly leave. Alistair was gone, but the evil that clung to him, the evil that had seeped into the very fabric of our community, that evil remained. It was in the cracks of the pavement, in the rustling of the trees, in the silence that followed the wind. We just had to hope it was satisfied, for now. But in our hearts, we feared it was only waiting, biding its time, until it decided to return.